The Baltimore Ravens rookie stole the show on day 2 of training camp. We talk about that, an update on DeAndre Hopkins and his injury that he suffered on day 1, as well as should the Ravens sign Christian Wilkins, all that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this Purple Friday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're 5 days a week here for you with Ravens coverage Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Plus, we have some bonus episodes sometimes on the weekends when we got the headlines to talk about. We also go live after every single Ravens game and every single piece of Ravens big news. Plus, now we have the Locked On Ravens squad show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail. That is live on Mondays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you out there to all the everydayers, first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Day 2 of training camp officially in the books for the Ravens. Day 3 is today. So we are going to have so much to talk about, and we do have so much to talk about on today's show. Of course, we'll get into all the training camp updates. In the final part of the show, we'll talk about a pretty big-time player that was just released by the Las Vegas Raiders and Christian Wilkins. Should the Ravens be gearing up to sign him or just add someone else to their roster, but particularly a defensive lineman like Christian Wilkins? We'll get to a little bit of that and just general news and updates in the final part of the show. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about DeAndre Hopkins. There was an injury update provided by John Harbaugh. We didn't really know there was an injury until yesterday, but here we are. But in the first part of the show, we're going to get into all the training camp updates, particularly about the Ravens rookies stealing the show at day 2 of training camp. And that is both drafted rookies and undrafted rookies. So both sides of the coin, really great news across the board for the Ravens. Not every single rookie was out there making impacts and making headlines, but we have a lot of them to talk about, and I'm excited to do it. So let's just start off with the man of the hour, and it seems like yesterday that was most certainly Malachi Starks, the Ravens' first-round pick, safety out of Georgia. High expectations for Malachi this season, especially because of what we saw last year at the safety spot with Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson, the Ravens scrambling around. Malachi Starks, I think, gives them a really, really consistent option next to Kyle Hamilton. And I think that's a really big thing for the Ravens, especially with how much they went through with that position last year. Now, Malachi had a great day on Thursday. He had a pass breakup on Charlie Kolar. He also had a Lamar Jackson interception. So first one of those for Malachi Starks. It's kind of like a welcome to the NFL moment a little bit. Like, hey, you're a little more of a Raven than you were yesterday if you can pick off Lamar Jackson in practice. That ball was apparently an overthrow. So, Malachi getting his hands on one of those. Also apparently had a nice run stuff. So Malachi really getting in on the action, and apparently on that throw, the incompletion to Charlie Kolar, according to reports, he came out of nowhere. Like, boom, he was there. And that's the type of skill set the Ravens need at that position, and that honestly is what Malachi is going to bring to them. It's the versatility, the ball skills, the awareness, the athleticism, like everything that you want out of a safety, Malachi Starks has. He is NFL ready playing at that Georgia program. It certainly gets you NFL ready, and that's what the Ravens need right now, right? It is NFL ready players. So I thought that it was great that Malachi kind of stole the headlines and stole the shows yesterday, because I think it gives him a lot of confidence, especially going up against players like Lamar Jackson and making the impact early on like this. I think pads haven't come on yet, and obviously I think, and we talked about this actually, Qadri Ismail and I and Sam Njoku on the squad show last night, where, you can take away certain things without the pads coming on in training camp. But once the pads come on, that's when you can really figure out some stuff. And so I'm excited to see Malachi and the rest of the rookie class with the pads on, particularly, offensive line, defensive line. You're not going to hear like Mike Green hasn't really made headlines these first 2 days. And that's okay. You're not necessarily going to hear a ton about defensive linemen. You'll hear some, it's not like they don't make any headlines without the pads on, but there's only so much, especially in the trenches, offensively and defensively, you can do. Like, for example, another rookie that had a nice play was Aeneas Peebles on the defensive line. You got a Fub, which is his nickname. He got a Fub from his teammates after a really nice pressure. But again, you're not going to get the same outcomes and the same types of results with pads versus without pads. But you can still take a decent amount away from it. And I think at the safety spot especially, you can take stuff away from it. So Malachi Starks looking really good on day 2, and that is a great sign for the Ravens because the goal is just all across the board here. The places where they didn't have consistent options last year, they just hope to have consistent options this year. Safety is one of those. Inside linebacker is another one of those. Like, those are the areas that it caused so much of a headache for the Ravens last season, having to deal with all that and going through all that. And they ended up kind of throwing a mishmash of guys together and making it work. But having steady, awesome, really productive presences at all those spots will help them out a lot. So Malachi Starks, again, I think probably the biggest winner of day 2 of Ravens training camp. And we'll get into some more about some of the vets and how they performed a little bit later on in the show and some of those general camp updates. But I want to stick with the rookie class just for a little bit more here because we're going to go to the kicker battle next. Now, the Ravens have been alternating their kickers, Tyler Loop and John Hoyland, in terms of who has been kicking on what day. So on Wednesday, Tyler Loop on the first day of training camp, he went 6 for 6 on field goals. Day 2 yesterday was John Hoyland's turn. He went 9 for 9. Perfect. So through 2 days, Ravens kickers are 15 for 15. John Hoyland, his long was 43. So I don't think Loop had a kick that was over 50 on Wednesday. So I don't think they've gotten to that part yet. But man, 9 for 9, that is nothing to scoff at. I think, again, a lot of people, Tyler Loop is the one that they drafted. He was the 6th round selection. And because of that, he was the first, obviously the first kicker the Ravens have ever drafted in their franchise history. He's the guy that's the favorite. And I still think that's the case even after this 9 for 9 day by John Hoyland. It's going to be a battle. I think it's going to be more of a battle, though, than people anticipate. I think everybody just kind of penciled in Loop as that guy. And I still think he's the one that eventually wins. And I'm not saying that, but I think it is going to be more of a battle than people might have anticipated when they spent draft capital on Tyler Loop. And I think that is good for both guys, honestly. Like, how I think this ends up playing out, this is my, early prediction. It's not super early, but I guess it is early, is that Loop will make the roster and Hoyland will be on the practice squad. They will keep a kicker on the practice squad, and that's kind of how it will go. It's essentially insurance for Tyler Loop, and especially if John Hoyland continues to perform like that. I mean, apparently both guys have been pretty impressive throughout the process. Loop had his struggles during, the end of minicamp and OTAs and all that. But, you have 2 guys that are going to compete here. And I think that it's good that the competition is really strong. Another spot where there is competition is at the cornerback position in Ruben Lowry, who's an undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, Chattanooga. He's someone that is not necessarily very widely known, but someone who is all around the football. I mean, literally everywhere. It is unreal the amount of headlines he has made as an undrafted rookie corner. The Ravens obviously took 2 corners in this past draft class, so they've been the ones that have been getting at least the rookie attention there. But Ruben Lowry, just for reference, had 3 interceptions during OTAs and minicamp. He had another one on Thursday. And John Harbaugh had a lot of praise for Ruben Lowry. He said, Ruben, he's all ball. He's all ball every day. That's all he thinks about, all he talks about. He eats, sleeps it, comes out here and flies around. He's a very smart player. And now I want to make this clear about how Eric DeCosta operates. And, if you've been listening to me every day on Locked On Ravens, you've heard me say this before. I might be sick of me saying it, but I'm going to say it again because it is relevant. The way that Eric DeCosta and his philosophy goes compared to what Isaiah Newsom and his philosophy was when he was the general manager. I mean, there's no right or wrong. I think, both guys did good jobs or are doing good jobs. Isaiah Newsom was very much, we're going to let the draft picks play it out. In the Isaiah Newsom era, the Ravens didn't really cut draft picks. Like, it happened, but it was rare. In the Eric DeCosta era, Eric DeCosta is not afraid to move off of a draft pick if someone else wins that job. And, let's say Robert Longerbeam doesn't end up making headlines. And just for an example, he was the second of the two corners drafted. That's why I'm actually very high on Longerbeam, but I'm just using him as an example. Let's say Longerbeam doesn't do well in training camp, doesn't have a great preseason, but he's like just on the bubble. And then Ruben Lowry like excels and just is crazy and balls out, like all this good stuff. Eric DeCosta will most likely keep Ruben Lowry. And that's how it should be. I agree with that philosophy. So, man, you got the undrafted guys putting in work. You got the drafted guys putting in work. And it's exciting to see these players get these headlines early because we know the impact that Roger Rosengarten and Nate Wiggins made as rookies last season. The Ravens need more of that this year, especially from their top two picks, Malachi Starks being one of those. So balling out all the way around for this rookie class, which is awesome. And hopefully we'll see more of the rookies in the headlines as well. Again, Mike Green, more of a pads thing, but still love to see him in the headlines a little bit. LeJonte Wester, someone that I'd love to see in the headlines. So still a lot of potential, not just for the guys that performed on Thursday, but for the guys who have not made the headlines yet. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, getting to more training camp updates, including John Harbaugh giving an update on DeAndre Hopkins and his injury status. So stay tuned, plenty to come here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. And Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And the seat views are right in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you'll be. There's no guesswork there. Gametime has you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Friday edition of the show. Day 3 of training camp for the Ravens is today, and we'll probably have a bonus episode tomorrow just recapping everything. I'm going to try after every day of training camp for the Ravens to have a recap the next day if it's on the weekend. So if there's a Friday practice, I'll do a bonus episode on Saturday. If there's Saturday practice, do the bonus episode on Sunday, just so that we can stay up to date and I get all the latest updates out. That's what I strive for here on Locked On the Ravens, that consistency. This is episode 1,560 consecutively for me here, coming up on my 7th season. My 6-year anniversary of the show is coming up soon here in a couple of weeks. So consistency is the key, and I'm going to keep providing those Ravens updates, and I absolutely love doing it. So appreciate all support here on the show. If you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and audio form as well as the same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out on any of the show content. Let's dive into training camp. Still, we talked about the rookies in the first part of the show. I want to start off with the DeAndre Hopkins injury update, and then we'll move more so into the general updates, Lamar Jackson, Rashod Bateman, the whole 9 yards there. DeAndre Hopkins was not at practice on Thursday. It was a little bit of a shock. It wasn't really any indication that DeAndre was injured. So, after the fact, that was a big talking point. John Harbaugh has asked about it, and essentially Harbaugh said that Hopkins is going to be okay, that he got held out of practice after he fell on his knee/leg, and the move essentially was out of an abundance of caution. So look, I get it. Like, I think that's honestly the smart approach to do here. If Hopkins was a little sore after falling down on that, cool. Like, keep him out, let him rest up. We're at the end of July. We don't need to be risking anybody's health or making something worse that can just heal with time. This is what the offseason is for. If you get a little dinged up in practice, if there is something that is bothering you, there's not a game on Sunday. You can rest. There's nothing you got to do to rush that back. So that's fine. I'm glad Harbaugh says he'll be all right. I'm not sure if he'll practice here today on Friday. If you're watching this after the fact, after the Ravens have practiced, you know that. I don't. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's bonus episode. But, just glad that D-Hop was able to, make a play yesterday. He obviously fell down on it. And, this is the thing. And for DeAndre Hopkins, you don't need him in your lineup to win a Super Bowl, but he certainly helps. What I mean by that is you're not relying on him the way that you would if you didn't have Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman. He is not your number one receiver. So, at this point, he's a guy that's going to help. He's going to make big plays. I have a lot of confidence in D-Hop this year, but at the same time, D-Hop has been bitten with injuries over the last handful of seasons. And so when I think D-Hop was signed, I kind of was of the mindset like, all right, we're probably going to have to account for some of this. Hopefully he can put together a full 17 this season. I'm not saying it's not possible. I think it is, but you always want to kind of have that in the back of your mind. And I think the Ravens, they are prepared. If they lose D-Hop, it is not the end of the world. But of course, as he and Lamar get acclimated with each other, you want to have them on the field as much as you can for chemistry and just kind of getting stuff down. Lamar kind of talked about that on Wednesday with the timing and how it's going to take some time. But again, if he's feeling a little sore, be cautious. I'm totally cool with that. I have no complaints whatsoever. So that's D-Hop. Other news and notes from Thursday's practice, and these here coming from BaltimoreRavens.com, Justin Robertson, who does a great job over there. Lamar Jackson, after kind of a solid yet unspectacular day on Wednesday, he apparently was near flawless on Thursday, had several pinpoint throws. He also had a deep ball. This was one of the plays of practice, a deep ball to Rashod Bateman down the sideline. He dropped the ball between Nate Wiggins and Kyle Hamilton, who were in good coverage for about 50 to 60 yards. Bateman apparently had an awesome double move to get open there. So Lamar and Rashod Bateman picking up, where they left off last season. I guess for the most part, there was a miscommunication on the Bills interception, but we don't have to talk about that. We can talk about how good they were last season. Obviously, they showed a lot of chemistry together last year. And, I'm really excited to see them get another year under their belt together. Roquan Smith has apparently looked really good. And, people have kind of talked about, and there's the whole, I guess, I don't even know if you want to call it controversy, I guess. But we'll call it controversy. There was controversy about Roquan and, that anonymous assistant calling Roquan, he's looked a little out of shape. He needs to, try to get back in shape. Roquan has apparently displayed tip-top shape over the first 2 days. He punched the ball out of Charlie Kohler's hands for a fumble after Kohler and Lamar Jackson connected for a pass. And he apparently also was step for step with Justice Hill on a deep wheel route, which honestly, to me, is very impressive. We saw Justice Hill cook defenders on those wheel routes time and time again last. It was honestly one of you got 3rd and 10, just give the ball to Justice Hill and let him cook. And one of those was that wheel route play. There was one against Pittsburgh where the defender, I think it was Peyton Wilson, ripped the ball away from Justice Hill on that. But 9 times out of 10, that play was a completion. So I'm pumped to see Justice play again this season. But hey, Roquan Smith making an impact. Apparently, Keaton Mitchell, he was really good. Apparently showed burst on an outside run. He beat defenders up the sideline and looks like he's back to full strength. That's really good. Trenton Simpson, we know there's that battle for the second inside linebacker spot next to Roquan Smith between Trenton Simpson and rookie Teddy Buchanan. Trenton Simpson nabbed an interception over the middle after a pass bounced off of the hands of Isaiah Likely. So, Ravens receivers and bouncing balls off of their hands into the defender's arms. I guess that's just something that's something they love to do, apparently. Hopefully they can cut down on that by the time the regular season rolls around. Also, Isaiah Likely had an incredible one-handed grab from Lamar Jackson. It was an awesome touch pass, and it was a huge gain for them. CJ Ravenel and Aeneas Peoples talked about Peoples in the first part of the show, but Ravenel also had quarterback pressures, which was great. And John Jenkins, who was going to come in and replace Michael Pierce, he had a bat down at the line of scrimmage. Now, something that has been noted by multiple reports, this is kind of more on the negative side. And actually, Kadri Ismail and I talked about this on yesterday's show a little bit. Apparently, Cooper Rush has not looked good at all. At all. It's been a really rough go for Cooper Rush, and that includes spring practices and includes the first 2 days of training camp. I don't want to overreact to this. And really, hopefully, we don't have to see Cooper Rush play in, games this year outside of, that's the dream job for Cooper Rush, right? That's what I want. I don't want Cooper Rush to play at all. I want Lamar to be healthy for the full 18 plus playoffs or 17 plus playoffs, all 18 weeks. And then, he plays in blowouts, right? The Tyler Huntley, Josh Johnson mop-up duty. That is now Cooper Rush mop-up duty. Because, we know if Lamar Jackson goes down for the season, I think everybody, we know what it is. But my argument for investing the money into a better backup quarterback than Tyler Huntley or Josh Johnson was that look, knock on wood, that does not happen. We're knocking on wood right there. If Lamar Jackson, let's say he gets injured on October 20th and he returns December 20th, and let's say he misses 8 games. Let's say he misses 8 games and he comes back for the stretch run as they make a push for the playoffs. Well, if your backup quarterback goes 1-7, you're probably out of playoff contention or very close to it by the time December 20th rolls around. But let's say that backup quarterback in 8 games can go 5-3 or maybe 6-2 and keeps your team in the hunt by the time your star quarterback comes back. Doesn't really feel like, at least through the first 2 days of training camp, that Cooper Rush is that guy for them. Q talked about on the show yesterday how Dallas's offense is pretty stylistically different than Baltimore's. And, obviously Baltimore's offense is very unique, but the style of quarterback that Cooper Rush is, he's more of a timing quarterback as opposed to, so the arm strength didn't have to show up as much because he's a timing thrower. Well, in this Ravens offense, timing throws matter, but it's not just that. There's a lot more that goes into it. So the fit was kind of weird from the start. Rush has shown that he can fill in backup duty, do a decent job at it. He did it for Dak and he was decent at it. But I'm a little concerned about the backup spot here. Hopefully Cooper Rush can stack together some good practices. I'm rooting for him. But, that's an early concern point, it feels like, for some people in training camp. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll wrap up the general news and notes from day 2 of training camp. And then we'll also get into Christian Wilkins. He was released by the Raiders in a shocking move on Thursday night. Should the Ravens be interested? All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football's back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and Locked On Ravens are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. You got draft boards, player analysis, the whole 9 yards. Yahoo Fantasy is the place to be. It is absolutely incredible. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, still talking Ravens training camp with you here. As we do, we talk Ravens football 5 days per week plus more on Locked On Ravens. Have a lot of exciting things coming your way. By the time the season starts, honestly, by the time the preseason starts, I'm trying to get this all up and running. So stay tuned for some announcements on that. And you'll see it in action, hopefully, in just a couple weeks. But really pumped for that. And obviously, we're continuing to bring you that daily Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. So if you want to come along for the ride, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and audio form. If you already are along for the ride, thank you so much for your support. Now, let's wrap up the Ravens training camp day 2 news and notes, and some names in here that you'll actually be very excited about. I know I am about these, and these are guys we've talked about. Standouts from OTA, standouts from minicamp. We got some Tez Walker action. Tez Walker beat Jaire Alexander on a go ball, apparently. Alexander, now, he got his get back. Apparently, he clamped him up the next time. But the fact that Tez Walker was able to get the better of Jaire Alexander, I'm not saying Tez is going to all of a sudden jump D-Hop for the number 3 role here. But I do think that he has a legitimate opportunity because, honestly, I haven't really heard Tylan Wallace's name all that much this offseason. There's a real shot Tez Walker will start the season as a number 4 receiver for the Ravens. And in the event, either DeAndre Hopkins has to miss time. Hopefully it does not happen. Knock on wood again. But in the event that, a receiver does have to miss time, Tez Walker can maybe step up and have a big role in those moments. So really awesome to see Tez get a good one over on Jaire there. TJ Tampa apparently got the better of Rashod Bateman. TJ Tampa, that's Kadri Ismail's guy. If you've been listening to Q come on the show or on the Ravens squad show, and he's my guy too. I love TJ Tampa. Honestly, all three of us do on the squad show, myself, Sam and Joku, and Q. He got the better of Rashod Bateman. Apparently it was a nice pass breakup on a vertical route. And then Mark Andrews got the better of Marlon Humphrey. He separated on a stop and go, and he ended up high pointing the ball over Marlon. So this truly is, and I've talked about it. I talked about it, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago. Iron sharpens iron, right? It's that mentality of this offense is so good, and the defense being able to go up against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and all those guys. Like, that's a big benefit to them, because then you go into the regular season against other offenses. You're like, man, this is easy. We go up against Lamar Jackson. We're good against your guys. And then same thing for the Ravens defense and the offense, the defense being as good as it is, the Ravens offense going up against them heading to the regular season, man, we have to face Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Jaire Alexander, XYZ, all these guys. This is easy for us. So truly iron sharpens iron makes a huge, huge difference. But other than that, just a couple of other things that, we can talk about a little bit more when it comes to training camp. And day 2 was Patrick Ricard he's been balling out. Apparently on a couple of plays, he's escorted cornerbacks to the sideline without a lot of effort. We know Patrick Ricard, we know what he means to this offense, obviously. So, we'll see how that all works out. And these updates coming from Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Banner. So be sure you go check out Jonas and his work. He provides really great coverage on the Ravens from training camp. So yeah, awesome day 2. Day 3 today. Hopefully some more really positive updates for the Ravens, and we'll have you covered. I'll do a bonus episode tomorrow talking about those updates and keeping everybody in the loop about what's going on at training camp, and the Tyler loop about what's going on at training camp. Yeah, that was bad. I apologize. But let's move on. Christian Wilkins. Should the Ravens keep on adding to their roster? Christian Wilkins got released by the Raiders on Thursday night. Honestly, it was a really shocking move. Came out of practically nowhere. And the reason for it was apparently the Raiders didn't really like what they were seeing out of Christian Wilkins and his recovery from a foot injury. And they said, hey, you know what? This doesn't really align with us here. We're going to cut ties here. So they ended up voiding the remaining $35.2 million of guaranteed money on his contract last month. And today, Wilkins filed a grievance with the NFLPA about that. So really talented player. Obviously, he is rehabbing from the injury. So, there is that to look at and talk about and think about. Wilkins, over the course of his career, he had 9 sacks in 2023 for Miami before signing with the Raiders in 2024. Only played 5 games last season. But, his interior pressure is really good, and he's able to, play a lot of different roles on that defensive line and be kind of a disruptor there. Do the Ravens need Christian Wilkins? No, they don't need Christian Wilkins, right? They don't. But we talked about this with Jaire Alexander. I'm like, no, the Ravens don't need Jaire Alexander. He'd be a luxury at that spot. But, hey, it'd be really cool if they were to go out there and get him. And lo and behold, they went out there and got him. Now, Christian Wilkins doesn't have the connection with Lamar that Jaire Alexander does. And, that certainly had a big factor. Jaire talked about that. He said he was, first of all, in love with the city of Baltimore, loved the fans, the weather, everything. And talked about, how he's always talked with Lamar about having something like this happen where they're competing for a Super Bowl together. Christian Wilkins doesn't have that connection. But if he says, hey, I want to win, I want to try to compete, and the foot stuff checks out and he's able to come back at whatever time, the Ravens can kind of just keep him on a shelf till he's fully healthy and be like, hey, take your time. We don't need you right now. We'll see you when you're healthy and, come ball out for us. Now, do I think this is going to happen? No. This is much less likely, honestly, than Jaire coming to Baltimore. Like, it just is. The Ravens D-line room is pretty much set right now. It should be 5 guys, and the 5 guys are going to be Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, Broderick Washington. You got John Jenkins and Aeneas Peoples. I almost said Christian Wilkins. I had to stop myself. Now, would I rather have Christian Wilkins over Broderick Washington? Yeah, I would. Christian Wilkins over John Jenkins. I mean, yeah, that too. But I think John Jenkins plays a very specific role for them. I mean, to me, it would be a swap out for me with Broderick Washington. I'd keep John Jenkins. I'm rooting for Broderick Washington. I haven't seen a lot from him. He signed that early extension, and there were a lot of high hopes for him. He just hasn't really lived up to that, in my opinion. And it's been unfortunate because I really liked Broderick Washington coming out of school and had a lot of high hopes for him. And not that he can't be good for them this season. He's had flashes, he's had moments. He hasn't been terrible for him, but I just think the expectations were higher for me for him. But while Wilkins will be an upgrade, I think they're going to stick with their guys. They're going to kind of go. It'd be fun, but the Ravens really don't need him. Like, I'm all for the Ravens signing. Like, I'm saying, hey, bring in Judon, bring in Clowney, bring in Wilkins, bring in Simmons. Like, I'm that kind of guy. But, talking about it and thinking about it and being realistic about it, the Ravens don't need him. They're probably not going to sign him. I just hope he doesn't go to a rival. That's what I'm going to hope for with Christian Wilkins. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning into the show today. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We'll be back here tomorrow with a bonus episode. We'll be diving into everything that happened on day 3 of Ravens training camp, all the updates and more. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.